The motto of our organization is now more than ever. And we chose that motto because international law and global cooperation are more important to our everyday lives now more than ever.
I joined the American branch 30 years ago when I was working as an attorney advisor at the U.S. Department of State. All of my colleagues said it was a terrific organization and a place where I could begin my networking. And it has paid off over all those years.
Nothing is more important in today's global world than an understanding of how international law can help address our collective needs as a human society.
By bringing together nationally and internationally recognized experts, ILW has provided an opportunity for the education of practitioners, scholars, and students, and it also provides a forum for the exchange of ideas and the development of international law.
It's difficult to identify a single panel that is memorable to me because the fact is they're all unique, they're all memorable.
ABILA has just been a really incredible resource in being able to connect me with other practitioners, but also other academics in one area of law where I practice before the International Court of Justice.
Over the years, I've developed not only colleagues who share my passion for international law and the law of the sea, but friends and folks I've worked with as co-authors on other projects.
The American branch is so relevant today because it's successfully bridging the gap between the profession and future generations of lawyers.
I'm incredibly proud of ABILA's 100-year legacy of doing that work through its conferences and its events and its committees. And I'm incredibly proud that that work continues to this day.
Not only is the world more connected today than ever before, but the challenges that it's facing require global cooperation, whether it's climate change, a global pandemic, protracted armed conflicts, or rising nationalism. ABILA provides a forum to address these challenges through education, research, and events.
Good morning. Welcome to the International Law Association American Branch's Centennial Celebration Kickoff. I'm David Attanasio, an associate at Deckert LLP, and much more importantly, a member of the ILA American Branch Board. I am part of the Centennial Committee, along with Philip Mormon, Chiara Giorgetti, and William Aceves. 2022 marks the 100th anniversary of the founding of the ILA American Branch. And after 100 years of providing a forum for the discussion and promotion of international law in the United States, the organization is thriving. This kickoff event marks just the first in a series of efforts this year to celebrate the contributions that the ILA American Branch has made over its 100 years of existence. We'll be launching a member spotlight video series and a longer documentary film to follow, as well as an event in Washington in conjunction with the American Society of International Law annual meeting. But today provides us with a first moment to reflect on where the branch came from and where it will be headed for its second 100 years. I am pleased to welcome Leila Sadat and David Stewart to discuss the branch's major contributions and the role it has had in the United States and beyond. Leila is the James Carr Professor of International Criminal Law at Washington University, St. Louis School of Law, and is the current president of the ILA American Branch. David is professor from practice at Georgetown University Law Center and serves as the current chair of the executive board committee for the branch. Both have been critical in sustaining and growing the branch over the years in their current positions and beyond. Leila, David.
Thank you very much, David. And I'm delighted that you could all join us for this celebration of the Centennial of the American Branch of International Law Association, and in paying tribute to the contributions made by the literally thousands of dedicated branch members who've preceded us over the past century. International law has long been an important component of the American approach in international affairs and foreign policy, even if not always at the center of attention. And it remains vital today. As a branch, we remain dedicated to the study, clarification, and development of international law, both public and private, and to contributing to the domestic and international understanding of and respect for international law, as well as its progressive development. As you know, and you certainly will hear in a few minutes, our branch engages in a wide range of activities and events, offers many ways for our branch members to contribute, not only through our annual International Law Weekend, which is one of the most substantive international law events of the American legal year, but also our regional conferences and specific public events on specific issues. And of course, through our various branch committees and the activities, contributions of our branch members to the International Law Association's committees and study groups. One of our major activities and contributions is through our involvement with the broader International Law Association itself, about which we'll hear more in a minute. I sometimes think in idle moments, what a delight it would be if we could somehow show or share with our predecessors what a wonderful organization they created 100 years ago. Tell them about the substantive contributions it's made over the ensuing century, about what a vibrant program the branch is able to offer today, and what a very collegial environment we have been able to sustain. To all current and past members, we thank you for your contributions. To those of you who may be drawn to the field, whether we are well along in your practice or just starting out, whether you are in private practice and business, in the academy, in government, in a non-governmental endeavor, we welcome you to join the branch, to become part of the ILA's worldwide network of people involved in all aspects of international law, and to promoting the development of and effectiveness of international law around the globe. So thank you for joining us. Leila?
Thank you so much, David. It's a thrill to follow you in so many ways, because you have been the chair and you were the president that I followed when I became president-elect. So thank you so much for your leadership over the many years. Friends, colleagues, ABILA members, ILA leadership, all of those gathered today, and all of those who will watch this video later, I'd like to reflect for just a few minutes on where we were and where we have come. In 1922, the year our branch began, the world's population was around 1.8 billion. The British Empire was at its largest expanse, covering 1/4 of the world and ruling over 1 in 4 people on Earth. Warren Harding was president and saw his election as a mandate to keep the United States out of the League of Nations. He loved technology, though, and he introduced the radio to the White House. Men wore wingtip shoes and important suits. Women wore bonnets, for after all, the 19th Amendment guaranteeing them the right to vote had only been ratified on August 18, 1920. Following my remarks, you will hear from John Noyes and Jim Nafziger, my inestimable colleagues, and 2 wonderful ABILA leaders about the history of the branch, started following the Great War in an America that was neither internationalist nor particularly progressive. So how, given the difficult conditions of our birth, has our tiny organization managed to thrive for 100 years? A recent Harvard Business Review article entitled How Winning Organizations Last 100 Years suggests that centennial organizations, those that endure for at least 10 decades, are very few and far between and share certain fundamental characteristics. Those include having a stable core of values and purpose, excellent stewardship of those values and resources, a strategic commitment to understanding society, how they can shape it, and how they can get the talent to do that, humble, long-term stewards without large egos who are keen to learn from the previous leaders and more concerned about the organization they will leave behind than how it looks while they are there. Public service and public openness. Most of the staff are part-timers of these successful centennials, busy doing brilliant things elsewhere and seeking fresh input and new ideas from new recruits. They focus on tirelessly tweaking their product to make it better, not bigger. They create bumps and embrace disruptive accidents, like pandemics, that bring individuals with different perspectives or new technology, open to get to question each other, to share problems, to think about how to solve them, and to engage in opportunities rather than always responding to crises. Maybe most importantly, centennial organizations believe that you should help others as much as you can and act like and become a family. The authors of the study of the centennials suggest that one thing all the organizations and businesses studied had in common was that they were, quote, radically traditional with a stable core, but a disruptive edge. And I think that describes our tiny organization to a T. We are first and foremost a service organization of individuals working for the betterment of the world through the teaching, study, and development of international law. We are small, but part of a larger whole, and we love that. We're bottom up rather than top down. Members can propose new committees and projects, serve on existing committees, propose panels at ILW, regional ILWs, or other events. There's not a lot of gatekeeping in our organization, but there are a lot of entrepreneurs. We are by and large a volunteer organization with little in the way of permanent staffing and no permanent physical space. We encourage students to attend meetings free of charge and keep our costs low for members. And our board has been remarkably stable, particularly in the adoption of a leadership troika model, which allows for continuity and effective collective governance. We have been incredibly blessed with an extraordinary group of devoted leaders, including many of those speaking today, who have given so much of their time and talent to serve this organization and have also welcomed newcomers in, like me many years ago, as times and the world changed. Today, we continue to cleave to our core values and the ILA mission of peace and justice through law. We have longtime dedicated board members and individuals in key leadership positions who steward us well. We continue to advance our mission through research, teaching, and studying international law as a practical as well as a scholarly discipline, and our annual meeting, International Law Weekend, has continued to grow and flourish even during the global pandemic. We continue to be a service organization and encourage the next generation of international lawyers to join free of charge and participate actively. We have also reached out to new constituencies and embraced diversity and inclusion as key elements of our successful future, while at the same time honoring our past. I've been so proud to serve as ABILA's second woman president and thrilled to see a woman as the chair of our parent organization, the ILA, and witness the continuing diversity of our global organization. For this reason, I'm convinced that in spite of the distant rumblings of war, the continued scourge of the pandemic, economic inequality, racism, religious tension, nationalism, and climate change, we will steadfastly continue what we do best: work together as a community dedicated to achieving peace and justice through law. Thank you so much for attending today, and happy birthday to the American Branch.
Thank you, Layla and David. Now I'm happy to introduce Jim Nafziger and John Noyce to provide an overview of the branch's history from its earliest days to the present. Jim is a Thomas B. Stoll Professor of Law at Willamette University College of Law and an Honorary Vice President of the branch. John is Roger J. Traynor Professor Emeritus at California Western School of Law and also an Honorary Vice President of the branch. Together, they have undertaken the challenging project of reconstructing the branch's history. Jim, John, are welcome to hear what you have uncovered.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here and join this celebration. We weren't the first ILA branch, you know. That distinction goes to the Netherlands branch, which was formed in 1910. But in the 1870s, when the American David Dudley Field was the first president of the Association for the Reform and Codification of the Law of Nations, as the ILA was then known, Field also headed the International Code Committee. And the International Code Committee was a US NGO. It promoted in the United States the same goals as the association, advancing international codification and arbitration. The Code Committee named delegates to association conferences, and the association, for its part, listed Code Committee officers in its conference report. So even if the United States wasn't the first country to have an official ILA branch, it was home to a 19th century national organization closely linked to the association. And when the American branch was formally created a century ago, it was still on the cutting edge. It was one of just a half dozen ILA branches. So what did the branch look like in the 1920s? Let me briefly characterize its focus, its membership, its publications, and its annual meetings. Focus. Some branch members were motivated by the idealistic view that international law codification and international arbitration or adjudication would lead to a peaceful world. This was a common theme in the ILA, especially before World War I. But in 1922, the focus of most branch members was not quite so lofty. Members were practical. They wanted to develop reasoned international standards for profitable maritime and commercial activities. They wanted a forum to share US perspectives about international law with the rest of the world. ABILA committees and debates dovetailed with the work of the ILA committees. There were few independent branch projects. Not quite everything was about commerce. For example, an ILA committee on a permanent international criminal court was active, producing a draft statute in the mid-1920s. But the Americans who participated on that committee and spoke about the court at ILA conferences were expressed some serious reservations about what they regarded as a utopian project. Membership and leadership. ABILA quickly became an active organization with a nationwide membership, although not unexpectedly, New York boasted considerably more members than any other state. Then, as now, branch leaders were prominent academics and practitioners, though in the 1920s, there was a higher percentage of practitioners than today in leadership roles. Beginning 100 years ago, in 1922, William Howard Taft, Chief Justice of the US Supreme Court, former US President, and an international lawyer, was serving as the honorary president of the branch. Several dozen members were Canadians, which did not yet have a branch of its own, and a few other countries were represented too. Was the branch 100% male? No, but almost. Jim and I identified, as of 1926, a grand total of 3 women among the branch's 659 members. Publications. The American branch started publishing its proceedings in 1922. The proceedings then appeared annually for several decades. This was how the branch committee reports and branch reactions to ILA work were memorialized and circulated. And finally, annual meetings. The proceedings also memorialized the branch's annual meetings. Each annual meeting featured 3 or 4 addresses by prominent academics and practitioners. Their remarks, sometimes quite candid, appear in the proceedings. Beginning several decades later, in the late 1960s, in an effort to reach out to a wider audience, the branch expanded its meeting format. It added to the schedule 1 regular seminar or panel co-organized with the Association of the Bar of the City of New York. By the mid-1970s, the panel idea expanded and International Law Weekend was born. Let me now pass the baton to Jim to reflect on some developments after the 1920s and to reflect on some significant themes about the branch's history.
Thanks, John, and thanks, David, for your introduction. John and I had the pleasure of writing a brief history of the organization to be part of a book that Vice Chair Catherine Kasedjian is preparing to commemorate eventually the 150th anniversary of the ILA as a whole. And in that history, we structured it in terms of 3 snapshots, the first of which John has basically summarized at the beginning, the second, 1970 to 1971, and the third, 2018 to 2019. And I will structure my remarks along that line. In 1970-71, our president was a very distinguished corporate executive, Cecil Olmsted, who had achieved a great deal of renown, both in that capacity and as a professor of international law. He later became president of the ILA as a whole, chair of the executive council and vice president, and would be honored as the ILA's first patron. So we were well served by him, as well as distinguished academics that included John Hazard of Columbia Law School and Harvard professors Richard Baxter and Louis Sohn. The branch had recorded 632 members at that point, and the 1971 annual meeting featured a dinner address by the then U.S. ambassador to the United Nations and future U.S. President George H.W. Bush, who spoke about revitalizing support for the United Nations in the United States. Let me just very briefly footnote a couple of the activities of the branch that were referred to earlier. First of all, the participation in the ILA as a whole. This snapshot I've just very briefly summarized was on the eve, really, of the 1972 conference of the ILA in New York, which was organized by ABILA. And during that same period of time, as has been mentioned, ABILA organized its first International Law Weekend, which has grown and grown. It has been the in-person format for it has been suspended, of course, during the pandemic, but basically it's attracted some 1,000 to 1,500 registrants each year and has included for a number of years when we've been able to meet in person in New York, a wonderful evening hosted each time by a different permanent mission to the United Nations. Belgium, Bulgaria, Estonia, I won't go down the whole list. And that's been a real attraction. We have had regional international law weekends that have been hosted by different law schools in California, Colorado, Georgia, Missouri, Ohio, Oregon, Texas, and Utah. For 2 decades, we published an international practitioners notebook. And in 1974, just after this snapshot, we began publishing our newsletter, which has no rival at all among any international law organizations today. And that's very much thanks to John, to David Stewart, and to Layla and Madeline George, who have made it an absolutely wonderful source of information. I can say that objectively because when I was president, one of my tasks was to publish a new newsletter, and it was definitely a vanilla version. It was about 8 pages, no photos, no graphics. And to see the change has, I think, been a kind of symbol of how we have grown as an organization. We did, however, during that period of time, include news that was sent to us from the Canadian branch. They didn't have the resources to publish their own newsletter, so they had a little column or 2 in ours, and they also organized a session at each International Law Weekend. Well, I'm running out of time. I just have a minute, I guess, minute or 2. And I do want to flash forward to 2018-19 as we do these snapshots in more or less 50-year increments. And I want to do that not simply to extol all of the growth and all of the activities that have continued to develop in the organization, but I want to make a more fundamental point, and it's something very important to me, and that is that in the run-up to the last snapshot in 2018 and 19, we had already greatly diversified our membership and our leadership. We've come a long ways from the 3 women in the initial group, and we have also greatly diversified in terms of race and ethnicity. And the point I want to make is this, that we've done it with only our very limited staff, more or less because it has been the right thing to do, and we've done it rather easily. I have been part of processes in other organizations that have been extremely elaborate, have been very substantially staffed, and that have focused for years on how to diversify, how to accomplish diversity, equality, and inclusion. And we've just done it. And it, I think, is reflected in the initial video, for example, and otherwise reflected in the entire organization. I don't mean to be Pollyannish, there's more to be done, but somehow we work together. And as Layla put it, we have a family and the family works. And I think that's partly because we're part of a larger multicultural organization, of course. So it isn't completely of our own making, but it has been, I think, a real feature in our growth. So diversity has been a hallmark in this last snapshot as we move on to the next 100 years. So I too wish ABILA, and I wish all of us, a very happy birthday.
Oh, goodness. Thank you so much. John and Jim really are in-house historians who have spent so much time laboring over the history of our organization, and to the point that this is unpaid work. This is a labor of love, essentially. And so we're deeply grateful to both of you for all the work that you've done, both as stewards of our organization and leadership, and now as historians. And of course, you continue to serve on our board, and Jim as a member of the ILA Management Committee. So let me turn to the next part of our program, if I can now, and introduce our international family. As I mentioned, I think we are very much a collegial organization that's a kind of family, and we are very fortunate to be part of a larger whole. And so we have 4 extraordinarily distinguished, I can't really tell you how distinguished because they have book-long resumes, but I'm just going to introduce them very briefly. Professor Christine Chinkin, who is the current ILA chair, our first woman chair, very exciting. She's an emerita professor of international law at the London School of Economics. And of course, she has served in many, many other roles, both in the ILA and in her job as a scholar and practitioner of international law. We'll then hear from Patricia Galvao-Teles, professor of the Autonomous University of Lisbon, a current member of the United Nations International Law Commission, and vice president of the Portuguese branch, which will host the next biennial meeting of our organization. Following that, we'll have Professor Catherine Kessedjian, ILA Vice Chair and President of the 2023 Organizing Committee for the 150th anniversary of the International Law Association. She is also the Honorary President of the French branch and Deputy Director of the European College of Paris. Merci beaucoup, Catherine. She also reminds us that our second language with the ILA is French. So I am going to recall that today. And then last but certainly not least, we have the prominent Judge Shunji Yanai, President of the ILA, President of the Japan branch, which also just celebrated its centennial last year, unfortunately virtually because of the pandemic, but we had a wonderful biennial nonetheless. And he is currently a judge of the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. So Christine, you have the virtual podium. I pass it to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Layla. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. And thank you very much for inviting me to join you for this important celebration. And I think it's especially exciting for me because it's one of my very first actions as chair of the executive committee. And so to be here to celebrate the American branch's 100th anniversary, just as we in the ILA headquarters are on the verge of celebrating our 150 years, as you mentioned. And I think it's worth reflecting how astonished, I suspect, the international lawyers who gathered together in Brussels in 1873 and founded an association dedicated to peace and justice through the study, clarification, and development of international law, just how astonished they would be if they could see the association today. An association with over 60 branches, an association with now a global membership. But importantly, and I think this is something you stressed, Layla, an association that continues to uphold the same values. And as it has grown so far beyond the colonial world of 1873, those values remain especially strong and important. And I think that the American branch in particular really does reflect that strong and vibrancy of the association. I think it's also, though, important to remember that as an association with the promotion of international law at its heart, that we cannot ignore that international law itself has another darker side. Contemporary international law does have its roots in colonialism. It's also too often been used to legitimate rather than to prevent violence, notably by the powerful to further their own interests, irrespective of the harms that are then caused to others. And in conjunction with this, we see again too often, and certainly in the current situation, attempts in domestic legal system to discount the restraints and strictures of international law, or to manipulate them for the pursuit of national interest or corporate interests, and therefore to undermine the international rule of law in global affairs. And this is why, for me, the ILA remains so important, now more than ever, to use the slogan or the catchphrase that the American branch has so pertinently chosen for its 100th anniversary. But I think it is the unique structures of the ILA that combine to enhance its capacity to demonstrate the potential of international law as an instrument for advancing justice and consequently still the ultimate goal, peace. Its global membership, bringing, as many of you have already mentioned, together international legal practitioners, judges, academics, students, international institutions, non-governmental organizations. The range of committees and study groups across public and private international law that are changed and developed according to needs and particular issues arising in the international forum. And two other features where the American branch has played an especially significant role: the research and dissemination work carried out collectively at the branch level, as well as individually by so many branch members, and of course the biannual conferences. Now, of course, I'm not even an expert in the history of the ILA itself, let alone the history of the American branch. I think I've learned more in the last 20 minutes from Jim and John about the history of the American branch, and I'm looking forward very much to reading about the American branch history and the history of so many other branches in the book that's already been mentioned that Kathleen is in the process of putting together. But I was fascinated to see that the 18th biannual conference was held in 1899 in Buffalo. So even before your branch was actually created, and with Mr. Justice Kennedy as president. And on a more personal note, I remember well the 76th conference in Washington in 2014, hosted again by the American branch, held in conjunction with ASIL, with an extremely important and stimulating program, as well as great hospitality at that conference. And Jim has already mentioned the 55th conference in New York in 1972. So it is a strong tradition of the conferences. And again, as you have all mentioned, the International Law Weekend held every year somewhere within the US, which provides the forum for a very spirited engagement between the members and others committed to international law. I attended a number of these when I was living in the United States, and I'm very much looking forward to the weekend in October later this year. COVID, of course, always permitting to make that possible. But as a former director of studies of the ILA, I also know how indebted the association is to members of the American branch who have given intellectual leadership, proposing new committees, as I said, international affairs suggests that research, dissemination, further work is needed in particular areas. They've served as committee chairs, as rapporteurs, as members in producing the work of the committee reports. And their contributions to the committee reports have been really very, very valuable indeed. And of course, there's been the work of so many members of the branch as officers of the association. Jim mentioned a particularly important, somebody who gave an enormous contribution to the ILA headquarters in Cecil Olmsted, but many others have also done so. And Jim, of course, you are continuing that tradition yourself as serving on the management committee. So the role of the American branch in headquarters is inestimable, I think, a very important branch. And I extend to you all my warmest congratulations, best wishes for your celebrations throughout the year. Maybe we'll even have a cake in October, as opposed to the virtual aspects that we're having now. But then, of course, and I'm sure, and I know from what you have just been saying, this is already in train, that we will have to look to the future, to your next 100 years, for instance. And we at headquarters are thinking about the changes that will be necessary for the ILA to progress as an association past its 150th anniversary next year. So to continue as a living organization for the promotion of international law. Some changes have already taken place, and the Executive Council has also made a commitment to and policies on enhancing diversity, very much reflecting, I think, again, the work that Jim has just been talking about in the American branch, and how important that is to ensure continued vibrancy and continued relevancy. Also, and again, this has been mentioned, the importance of bringing younger scholars together, and so that they too can participate in the important work of international law. But I think beyond the institutional matters of the association, both at headquarters and at the American branch, there is the important point for lawyers who believe in international law, both those who have populated the discipline over many years, worked in international law for so long, as well as those more recently coming to it, how we have to grapple with how that we can enrich the international rule of law, how we can continue to ensure its relevance in what is a fairly ruthless world in many ways, and to continue to ensure that it has that vibrancy as a regime for the furtherance of peace, a goal that I think we all share. So thank you, Leila. Have a great year. And I look forward to joining with you all, well, Portugal first, I hope, and then later on in October at the International Law Weekend.
Thank you so much. And yes, more to come on our gala celebration in New York in October. But before we get there, let's invite Patricia Galvao-Telej to introduce herself. And thank you, Patricia, for being here.
Thank you so much, Leila, for the invitation to join you at the Centennial Celebration Kickoff event. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here on behalf of the Portuguese branch of the International Law Association. I have to say that the Portuguese branch being so young compared to the American branch, I mean, we've barely been a teenager until recently and attained adulthood very recently. We look with great respect and great admiration to the American branch, who is now celebrating 100 years. But I suppose that's also part of the strength and the richness of ILA, that it has branches that have longer experiences and certainly are bigger and more with more resources. And then you have smaller branches that, in spite of being smaller and more recent, they are inspired by the largest branches and more experienced branches, and have the energy and the desire also to bring a contribution. And it's certainly inspired by what you've done at ABILA, Leila, and you and your predecessors. I have to say a special hello to David also, who was probably the first president of ABILA that I met. And I have to say that it's a bit animated by that spirit of seeing national branches that are so active. And I've spent quite some time in international law weekends in New York, or virtually in the last 2 years, but coming to New York on a regular basis also for International Law Week at the UN. When I started going also to the International Law Weekend, I said, no, this is now International Law 24/7. It's no longer the week or the weekend, because it is, I think, one of the great things that ABILA does, the International Law Weekend, and that really inspires us all to organize meetings where we can all come together from all over the world and discuss important matters. And this is what animates the Portuguese branch to organize the next biannual conference, the 80th, also significant number, biannual conference in Lisbon in June. Let's hope that we can all be there and in person, COVID permitting. We're working very hard and hope to have the website up and running very soon, where you can see what we have prepared for you. And I want just to highlight, and of course, besides inviting you all and encouraging you all to come to Lisbon, I want to mention that theme, the overall theme of the conference, which is international law, our common good. And we thought this was a very fitting theme, the theme for the moment that international law is going through now. And it shows that we all need to do more to protect it. And I think that's what ABILA does, and that's what each national branch and ILA as an organization does. We need to protect international law. We need to protect it as a common good. And we're very happy to be able to organize a conference to honor that commitment. So again, many thanks for the invitation, and all the best wishes for the next 100 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yes, absolutely. See you in Lisbon. Fingers crossed that the pandemic doesn't stop that wonderful event from happening. And now I'd like to pass the virtual podium to Catherine Kessadjian, who is the honorary president of the French branch. And Catherine, you have the floor. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Leila. And it's a real pleasure to be with all of you for this anniversary. And I want to congratulate the American branch on its centennial and congratulate the women and men who are doing the work. And the branch is really what all of you is making it to be. I have already opened a bottle of champagne in your honor, but I understand the toast is for later, so I will not raise my glass right now and wait until it is time to do that. But it's here. I have it here with me. And I will drink the rest of the bottle with 4 American friends who are coming home tonight, COVID-free, and we will be celebrating with you over dinner. Let me tell you what I think the ILA 2 strengths are. And I think the first one, the ILA is a federation whose roots are its branches. So don't ask me to make more of a tree and natural metaphor, but it's quite an amazing creation to see how blossoming all of our branches are doing. And the American branch has been really a highlight in the work and in the life of the ILA as a federation. So thank you for that. Of course, you are bringing the history of the organization at the forefront because it is our American founding fathers who thought about organizing such an association. At first, it was going to be a conference to create a code of international law. Believe it, that was not the French who spoke of a code, that was the Americans. But finally they decided, and that was the 1871 idea. But in 1873, they finally decided to create the association. And when they came to Europe to create this association, they didn't come to England, they didn't come to France, they went to Brussels, well, first Ghent and then Brussels. And the organization was, for historical reasons, was actually created in Brussels. And when I was reading the first report of the 2 first conferences, the 1873 and the 1874, by the way, the 1874 was in New York, immediately after the Brussels conference, it was in New York. But unfortunately, those reports, for some reason, were not published before 1903. So it has been quite difficult for me to find them. But finally, I have those reports. And it's interesting to note that the preface mentions that fortunately, the society does not gather dreamers, but it gathers international lawyers who are doing concrete work, the real work in international law. And they are gathering not only university people, but practitioners and also non-jurists. It is in the first report of the association, non-jurists, economists, philanthropists, publicists, ship owners, underwriters, and merchants. So that is the second aspect that I really like most about the ILA, is this really very diverse group of people who speak of the same language, the language of international law, and who have at heart the betterment of international society. So with that, I think it was the inspiration, mainly the inspiration for the 150th anniversary. And Leila, you have asked me to say a few words about that. I will be very, very brief. Our website has been up for the past 6 or 7 months already. You can find it quite easily on the internet. We have a newsletter that actually Christine Schinkin very kindly opened the last one, which was just published. You can subscribe to the newsletter. And what we have chosen to do is actually to look at international law for the future and to ask each of us to discuss what kind of international law do we want for the next 30, 50 years? And that's why we have chosen the methods of the white papers. We are preparing 24 white papers. You can find all the steering committees who are now working on those white papers, and those white papers will be critically discussed in 2023. So with that, I will leave you with, again, many, many congratulations to the American branch, and looking forward to your contribution to 2023 and beyond. Thank you, Leila.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Merci. And I hope you will come to New York and drink champagne with us as well in person. And now let me turn over the virtual podium to Judge Yanai. You have the floor.
Thank you very much for your introduction and invitation, Leila. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are. It is a distinct privilege and pleasure for me to congratulate the American branch of the ILA on its centennial celebration. I do this in 2 capacities, one as president of the ILA until the next biennial conference in Lisbon in June, the other as president of the Japan branch. Let me express my heartfelt congratulations on your reaching this milestone. The American branch is one of the ILA's oldest. I have always greatly appreciated the invaluable contributions it has made to the development of international law over the years. Through these years, in which peace has been interrupted by 2 world wars, the Cold War, and other conflicts, the American branch has made strenuous efforts to help establish and strengthen the rule of law in international relations. These, of course, are the main goals of the ILA. I have enjoyed working closely with Professor James Nartiga, the former president of the American branch, and ILA vice chair in the Executive Council and other ILA meetings. On behalf of the Japan branch, I would like to take this opportunity to once again thank the American branch for its great assistance in connection with the Kyoto Biennial Conference. We had planned to host the conference in Kyoto in 2014, However, the disruptions caused by the 2011 earthquake and tsunami made the original schedule unfeasible. When we were facing this crisis and desperately trying to overcome multiple difficulties, the American branch kindly volunteered to host the 2014 conference in our stead. As a result, we were able to postpone the Kyoto conference to August of 2020. Just as we were preparing for that event, however, the COVID-19 pandemic struck, making it impossible to operate in an in-person format. The unavoidable move online made many of the preparations moot and created difficulties in finance and conference organization. The American branch gave us generous financial assistance, which allowed us to go forward with the 2020 Kyoto conference and into the future. Although the COVID-19 created many challenges for the Japan branch in hosting the conference online, I have to say there were some positive aspects too. We were afraid the meeting would turn out to be quite modest. However, everything worked out fine. 500 participants registered, and I think this experience opened new digital possibilities for the ILA. The Kyoto conference was held online in November and December. The closing session was held on December 13, 2020, coinciding with the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Japan branch. We were thus able to celebrate our centennial in the presence of many ILA members joining online from all over the world. Next year, we will celebrate the 150th anniversary of the ILA. I look forward to the commemoration to be held in Paris. Once again, congratulations on your centennial celebration. I look forward to continuing to work closely with the American branch under the leadership of President Leila Sadat. Happy birthday. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judge Unai, and thank you for getting up very, very early in the morning or staying up very, very late at night.
You're welcome.
To be with us. This is a sign of the dedication of our global participants that they're willing to speak at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to our organization. We really deeply appreciate it. So it is my honor now to acknowledge our patrons. No organization can survive. As I mentioned, there are many criteria that that make a centennial organization. And one is having individuals who actually put their treasure where their heart is, as we would say, and have given very generously to the financing of our organization. I think Maddie George is going to put a slide up. I'm not going to read all the names in the interest of time, but these are individuals who have become life members of the branch. They do not pay annual dues. They are all extraordinarily still very active, except those who have unfortunately passed away, who you don't see their names here. Although a few are actually. And our patrons really are, in a way, the lifeblood of our organization. And just to let you know how extraordinary the commitment is of our board members, I opened a new Second Century campaign at our last board meeting and invited individuals to become a patron of the branch, and 4 members of the board actually stepped up to the plate right away, including the incoming president, who you'll hear from in a moment, to become patrons of the branch. As part of our Second Century campaign, we will be adding a new tier of membership, allowing individuals who've already given generously as sustaining members or as patrons to add to their contributions, and we'll be creating that sort of category of sustainer very soon. And that will allow us, in a sense, to support a permanent secretariat, which we realize that we need in order to continue doing what we do. Scholarships for students from abroad. We recently entered into sort of an understanding with the South African branch, and we had many students from the South African branch who came and attended and wrote wonderful pieces about ILW 2021. We want to be in person. We are going to be in person from October 20th to 22nd in New York, where we'll have a gala dinner to also celebrate our 100th birthday and the Second Century campaign. And we want to be able to pay to bring students to the meetings, young PhDs, young academics, scholars, to allow them to participate fully in our work. With that said, thank you to all of our patrons. Time doesn't permit me to read all of your names, but I am so proud and honored by all of your faith in our organization. Now I would like to turn the virtual podium over to our last speaker, who is President-elect Michael Scharf. Michael, you have the virtual podium.
Thank you so much, Layla, and thank you everybody who participated in today's celebration. So as president-elect, I stand on the shoulders of a number of distinguished practitioners and academics who have led the branch for 100 years. And with the help of an amazing board and terrific committee chairs, it is my privilege to launch us on the next 100. We do so in difficult times, but challenges bring opportunities. And so a toast. If you have something to drink, now's the time. A toast in recognition of our branch's rich history and past triumphs. A toast to all the members who contributed to its success. And a toast in contemplation of our bold aspirations for the future as we seek to promote peace and justice through international law. 100 lat, which in Polish means 100 years.
Thank you so much, Michael. And hopefully we'll be drinking another toast together in New York in not too long, and even before that in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. That concludes today's event.